Oh, well, hello there, neighbor. You always manage to beat me here. Who let you in this time? I'm going to figure out your secret one of these days. Well, I hope you're off to a great week, whether you're at the start of it, or hope you're finishing a great week if you're at the end of it. Brought my drink with me as usual. This time's Code Red Mountain Dew. Switch between that and Dr. Pepper. Occasionally a coffee, because my wife is a coffee person, and I've put our book that we're reading together over here on the shelf. Give me just a moment to go and grab it here. All right. Well, if you're new here to the library, welcome. And maybe you'd like to go back a couple of videos ago when we started off the book, because today we will be reading chapter 3 of At the Back of the North Wind by George Macdonald. So I wouldn't want you to miss all the context there. And this chapter is called Old Diamond. I hope that you guys are enjoying reading together and just using it as some time to center yourself on the Lord and on some thinking about who He calls us to be through this story, because we're always thinking in stories. We're always thinking in some kind of narrative, whether we're conscious of that or not. We're always living in some kind of story, which is the story that we've told ourselves. And whether that's a real story or it's a fake story, whether it's a book like this, we're people that care about stories, and it's through stories like this that we can gain a lot of spiritual insight. That's why Jesus uses stories like the prodigal son, right? Or like the lost sheep, or the good Samaritan. So, and of course the Bible is full of many stories as well. Anyway, let's begin in chapter 3. Diamond woke very early in the morning and thought what a curious dream he had had. And this chapter is called Old Diamond, if I did not mention that. But the memory grew brighter and brighter in his head, until it did not look altogether like a dream, and he began to doubt whether he had not really been abroad in the wind last night. He came to the conclusion that if he had really been brought home to his mother by Mrs. Crump, she would say something to him about it, and that would settle the matter. Then he got up and dressed himself, but finding that his father and mother were not yet stirring, he went down the ladder to the stable. There he found that even old Diamond was not awake yet, for he, as well as young Diamond, always got up the moment he woke. And now he was lying as flat as a horse could lie upon his nice trim bed of straw. "I'll give old Diamond a surprise," thought the boy. And creeping up very softly, before the horse knew, he was astride of his back. Then it was young Diamond's turn to have more of a surprise than he had expected, For as with an earthquake, with a rumbling and a rocking hither and thither, a sprawling of legs and heaving as of many backs, young Diamond found himself hoisted up in the air, with both hands twisted in the horse's mane. The next instant, old Diamond lashed out with both his hind legs, and giving one cry of terror, young Diamond found himself lying on his neck, with his arms as far around it as they would go. But then the horse stood as still as a stone, except that he lifted his head gently up to let the boy slip down to his back. For when he heard young Diamond's cry, he knew that there was nothing to kick about. For young Diamond was a good boy, and old Diamond was a good horse, and the one was all right on the back of the other. So you get this sense that the connection between the boy and the horse, that the horse knows, even if he doesn't speak our language, he knows that, Diamond is a good boy. Any of us that have had pets for any amount of time know that there's more going on in their senses than are immediately obvious sometimes. And there's this old connection between humanity and horses in particular. Now, it's not always been the best kind of connection, They were used a lot in history for war. But also there was a serious love in many accounts between people and their horses. And there's something about like the wildness of animals in particular, like dogs or horses or cats or whatever they may be, that learning to figure out how to get along with it really shapes you. And I think Plato somewhere talks about how it forms your soul, horseback riding in particular. And then the Persians, the Persians are in the Bible there, and they lived by a rule of three important things, especially during like Cyrus's reign, King Cyrus from the Bible, which was the truth, the bow, and the horse. They cared about the truth, they cared about archery, and they cared about horses. So there's a long history of horses. Anyway, sorry for that long diatribe there. As soon as Diamond had got himself comfortable on the saddle place, the horse began pulling at the hay, and the boy began thinking. He had never mounted Diamond himself before, and he had never got off him without being lifted down. So he sat while the horse ate, wondering how he was to reach the ground. But while he meditated, his mother woke, and her first thought was to see her boy. She had visited him twice during the night and found him sleeping quietly. Now his bed was empty, and she was frightened. Now, we've all had this experience as parents with children just doing things, that they've never done before, just to do it, not thinking it through. And then also the experience as parents, you find their bed empty, or you find them not where they should be, and you freak out. Diamond! Diamond! Where are you, Diamond? She called out. Diamond turned his head where he sat like a knight on his steed in an enchanted stall, and cried aloud. Here, mother! Where, Diamond? She returned. Here, mother, on Diamond's neck. She came running to the ladder, and peeping down, saw him aloft on the great horse. Come down, Diamond, she said. "I can't," answered Diamond. "How did you get up?" asked his mother. "Quite easily," answered he. "But when I got up, Diamond would get up too, and so here I am." His mother thought he had been walking in his sleep again, and hurried down the ladder. She did not much like going up to the horse, for she had not been used to horses, but she would have gone into a lion's den, not to say a horse's stall, to help her boy. So she went and lifted him off Diamond's back and felt braver all her life after. I like that little note, and felt braver all her life after, even though she wasn't used to horses. That she did the one thing for him because she loved him, and then felt braver all her life after. Just that one try sometimes will change our perception of things. She carried him in her arms up to her room, but afraid of frightening him at his own sleepwalking, as she supposed it, said nothing about last night. Before the next day was over, Diamond had almost concluded the whole adventure a dream. For a week his mother watched him very carefully, going into the loft several times a night, as often, in fact, as she woke. Every time she found him fast asleep. All that week it was hard weather. The grass showed white in the morning with the hoar frost, which clung like tiny comfits to every blade. And as Diamond's shoes were not good, and his mother had not quite saved up enough money to get him the new pair she so much wanted for him, she would not let him run out. He played all his games over and over indoors, especially that of driving 2 chairs harnessed to the baby's cradle. And if they did not go very fast, they went as fast as could be expected of the best chairs in the world, although one of them had only 3 legs, and the other only half a back. And so here we get Diamond's playfulness, but also, their poverty, and they don't have everything. Everything's a little bit worn out in different ways. And also, you get the window, and I can relate to this with it now being still summertime and the kids indoors, nothing to do, over and over again, playing the same things, and wanting to do other things and going a little crazy. At length his mother brought home his new shoes, and no sooner did she find they fitted him than she told him he might run out in the yard and amuse himself for an hour. The sun was going down when he flew from the door like a bird from its cage. All the world was new to him. And you get that experience sometimes where you've been inside for a while, and then you finally go back out, and it's like, whoa, okay, I'm outside. A great fire of sunset burned on the top of the gate that led from the stables to the house. Above the fire in the sky lay a large lake of green light, above that a golden cloud, and over that the blue of the wintry heavens. And Diamond thought that, next to his own home, he had never seen any place he would like so much to live in as that sky. For it is not fine things that make home a nice place, but your mother and your father. Of course, home is where the heart is, right? Home is with mom and dad, wherever they're at. As he was yet looking at the lovely colors, the gates were thrown open, and there was old Diamond and his friend in the carriage, dancing with impatience to get at their stalls and their oats. And in they came. Diamond was not in the least afraid of his father driving over him, but careful not to spoil the grand show he made with his fine horses and his multitudinous cape with a red edge to every fold. He slipped out of the way and let him dash right on to the stables. To be quite safe, he had to step into the recess of the door that led from the yard to the shrubbery. As he stood there, he remembered how the wind had driven him to this same spot on the night of his dream. And once more he was almost sure that it was no dream. At all events, he would go in and see whether things looked at all now as they did then. He opened the door and passed through the little belt of shrubbery. Not a flower was to be seen in the beds on the lawn. Even the brave old chrysanthemums and Christmas roses had passed away before the frost. What? Yes, there was one. He ran and knelt down to look at it. It was a primrose, a dwarfish thing, but perfect in shape, a baby wonder. As he stooped his face to see it close, a little wind began to blow, and 2 or 3 long leaves that stood up behind the flower shook and waved and quivered, but the primrose lay still in the green hollow, looking up at the sky and not seeming to know that the wind was blowing at all. It was just a one eye that the dull black wintry earth had opened to look at the sky with. All at once Diamond thought it was saying its prayers, and he ought not to be staring at it so. He ran to the stable to see his father make Diamond's bed. Then his father took him in his arms, carried him up the ladder, and set him down at the table where they were going to have their tea. And then I'll pause right here for a second. In many of George Macdonald's books, such as this other one here, there's notes about, or there's ideas of like flowers praying and communicating with their creator as well in their own way. And there's a beautiful quote there and little about that. And also it reminds me of this other thing here. Oh, I think I put it on the other shelf. Let me grab it for us here. Yes, here we go. It reminds me too, and I hope that I hope you don't mind these little anecdotes or digressions here that I'm giving us. Hope you're partly coming for that, but anyway, it reminds me of this beautiful little book here too, by another favorite author of mine. I'm in the process of reorganizing this library, so I got part of the Kierkegaard books over there and part of them over here. But anyway, this one is called The Lily of the Field and the Bird of the Air by Kierkegaard, a Danish philosopher who lived a couple hundred years ago, but it's not a long book. It's a little book. And what I've gotten from the main idea of it is that he's playing off of Jesus's words to us in the New Testament there about worry, right? And about not worrying, and to look at the flowers, look at the lily of the field and the bird of the air, and see how God clothes them, how God takes care of them, and aren't you more precious than they are? And what Kierkegaard kind of draws out there is that if we do follow Jesus' admonition to look at the birds and the flowers, then we will discover obedience. Because we don't always follow in the way that God wants us to, as set out for us to follow. But the birds and the flowers, they are in complete obedience to their Creator. They follow nature has given to them by God. And so I think George MacDonald also wants us to pay attention through his fiction and other writings here, to pay attention to the way that, it's God in whom we live and move and have our being. And God has given creation to everything. Everything that exists is within God. It's God in whom we live, in whom we live and move and have our being. And He gives life and being to everything. Apart from God, there is no life, right? That's why in Genesis, when God removes His Spirit from people after 120 years, they die. And so we should, when we look at the world around us, pay attention to all of creation here. And George MacDonald's good at drawing us to that. Anyway, back to the story. Mrs. very poorly, said Diamond's father. Mrs. has been to the doctor with her today. And sometimes he'll use some of this language, old Scott kind of lingo. But and she looked very glum when she came out again. I was a-watching of them to see what doctor had said. And didn't Miss look glum too? Asked his mother. Not half as glum as Mrs., returned the coachman. You see, but he lowered his voice, and Diamond could not make out more than a word here and there, for Diamond's father was not only one of the finest of coachmen to look at, and one of the best drivers, but one of the most discreet of servants as well. Therefore he did not talk about family affairs to anyone but his wife, whom he had proved better than himself long ago, and was careful that even Diamond should hear nothing he could repeat again concerning Master and his family. Okay, so you see how much they care about their not being gossips, which the Bible, of course, reminds us many, many times not to gossip, and that's easy sin to I say sin because nobody, we think, oh yeah, stealing is a sin, of course, and yada yada. But gossip, gossip is a sin as well. But we kind of just, oh well, that's one that we can go for. But George MacDonald wants to show us no, we should be more careful in that. And he is also really good at. C.S. Lewis has this. I'll just show it to you, and then I don't want to make a promise I can't hold to, but I will try not to go on too many digressions here. But here is is it here? Yeah, somewhere here. Yes. C.S. Lewis has a little annotated collection of quotes and things from George MacDonald, and in the beginning, in the preface, he writes about what George MacDonald meant to him, and meant to him at that time, and he writes about his style of character development and how George MacDonald in his characters in his stories, it's like the opposite of most stories, because you can especially see this in Hollywood today, right? But even in books as well. Most of the time the villains are better told and more interesting in Hollywood today, or in books written today, or any kind of TV shows, or what, right? Some so much so that they make entire spin-offs about the villains, right? And those do better sometimes than the good characters. And the good characters are often terribly written or terribly done. in today's world because, we're so obsessed with this morally gray and like darker kind of storytelling, right? Because we think that's more authentic or something, right? And C.S. Lewis says, well, George Macdonald is actually pretty awful, pretty bad at doing bad characters or evil characters. They don't come across that well, but his good characters really, really shine, because he believes in it. He believes in the goodness, not only the goodness of God, which is of course what his main thing, but he believes in the goodness of people and the importance of showing what good people look like. And so you can see not only is Diamond good, but you can see how much of that he gets from his father and mother in the story, how good his father and mother are. So just to make that point real quick. It was bedtime soon, and Diamond went to bed and fell fast asleep. He awoke all at once in the dark. "Open the window, Diamond," said a voice. Now Diamond's mother had once more pasted up North Wind's window. "Are you North Wind?" said Diamond. "I don't hear you blowing." "No, but you hear me talking. Open the window, for I haven't over much time." "Yes," returned Diamond, "but please, North Wind, where's the use? You left me all alone last time." He had got up on his knees and was busy with his nails once more at the paper over the hole in the wall. For now that North Wind spoke again, he remembered all that had taken place before as distinctly as if it had happened only last night. "Yes, but that was your fault," returned North Wind. "I had work to do, and besides, a gentleman should never keep a lady waiting." "But I'm not a gentleman," said Diamond, scratching away at the paper. "I hope you won't say so 10 years after this." "I'm going to be a coachman, and a coachman is not a gentleman," persisted Diamond. "We call your father a gentleman in our house," said North Wind. "He doesn't call himself one," said Diamond. "That's of no consequence. Every man ought to be a gentleman, and your father is one." And I just want to say that I love a whole bunch of what he's done here. He George Macdonald's telling us North Wind, first of all, says we, and I think maybe we'll see. He means to imply the Trinity. Of course, I've read this before, so I don't want to give everything away, but maybe he means a we as in, the 3-in-1 kind of thing of our God, because this North Wind does seem to be a God-like character, or remind us of God. And also, I love how North Wind says, we call him a gentleman, even though Diamond says he doesn't call himself a gentleman. And it shows two things at once, I think, if I'm not giving him too much credit. Well, of course, every time we write or say something, it often means more than we intend, but it doesn't make it any less valuable, right? But I love that that his father is not, so haughty or proud to call himself a gentleman, right? But a true gentleman, of course, wouldn't do that. And then North Wind says, well, that's, it's almost like that's exactly why we do call him a gentleman in our house. And everyone should be a gentleman. Every man ought to be a gentleman. Anyway, Diamond was so pleased to hear this that he scratched at the paper like 10 mice, and getting hold of the edge of it, tore it off. The next instant, a young girl glided across the bed and stood upon the floor. "Oh, dear," said Diamond, quite dismayed. "I didn't know. Who are you, please?" And maybe this is the way that God shows up in different ways, right? I'm North Wind. Are you really? Yes, make haste. But you're no bigger than me. Do you think I care about how big or little I am? Didn't you see me this evening? I was less then. No? Where were you? Or where was you, he says. Behind the leaves of the primrose. Didn't you see them blowing? Yes. Make haste then if you want to go with me. So that wind blowing, of course, was the nod earlier. It's everything is going to come back all the time here. But you are not big enough to take care of me. I think you are only Miss North Wind. So not Mrs., but Miss North Wind. You're not big enough to take care of me. Of course, that's a question, right? That we often use. I am big enough to show you the way anyhow. But if you won't come, why, you must stay. I must dress myself. I didn't mind with a grown lady, but I couldn't go with a little girl in my nightgown. Very well. I'm not in such a hurry as I was the other night. Dress as fast as you can, and I'll go and shake the primrose leaves till you come. Don't hurt it, said Diamond. Of course, this is getting after our estimation that God is often not big enough to handle everything he does handle, and it's just good. North Wind broke out in a little laugh like the breaking of silver bubbles, and was gone in a moment. Diamond saw, for it was a starlit night, and the mass of hay was at a low ebb now, the gleam of something vanishing down the stair, and springing out of bed, dressed himself as fast as ever he could. Then he crept out into the yard, through the door in the wall, and away to the primrose. Behind it stood North Wind, leaning over it and looking at the flower as if she had been its mother. Come along, she said, jumping up and holding out her hand. Diamond took her hand. It was cold, but so pleasant and full of life. It was better than warm. She led him across the garden. With one bound, she was on the top of the wall. Diamond was left at the foot. Stop! Stop! He cried. Please, I can't jump like that. You don't try, said North Wind, who from the top looked down a foot taller than before. Give me your hand again, and I will try, said Diamond. This is kind of the Peter and the getting out of the boat and walking on the water, right? Kind of thing. She reached down. Diamond laid hold of her hand, gave a great spring, and stood beside her. This is nice, he said. Another bound, and they stood in the road by the river. It was full tide, and the stars were shining clear in its depths, for it lay still, waiting for the turn to run down again to the sea. They walked along its side, but they had not walked far before its surface was covered with ripples, and the stars had vanished from its bosom. And North Wind was now tall as a full-grown girl, and you can see that she's like that in this drawing here. Her hair was flying about her head, and the wind was blowing a breeze down the river. But she turned aside and went up a narrow lane, and as she went, her hair fell down around her. I have some rather disagreeable work to do tonight, she said, before I get out to sea, and I must set about it at once. The disagreeable work must be looked after first. So saying, she laid hold of Diamond and began to run, gliding along faster and faster. Diamond kept up with her as well as he could. She made many turnings and windings, apparently because it was not quite easy to get him over walls and houses. Once they ran through a hall where they found back and front doors open. At the foot of the stair, North Wind stood still, and Diamond, hearing a great growl, stared in terror, and there, instead of North Wind, was a huge wolf by his side. He let go his hold in dismay, and the wolf bounded up the stair. The windows of the house rattled and shook as if guns were firing, and the sound of a great fall came from above. Diamond, with white face, staring up at the landing. Surely, he thought, North Wind can't be eating one of the children. Coming to himself all at once, he rushed after her with his little fists clenched. There were ladies in long trains going up and down the stairs, and gentlemen in white neckties attending on them, who stared at him. But none of them were of the people of the house, and they said nothing. Before he reached the head of the stair, however, North Wind met him, took him by the hand, and hurried down and out of the house. "I hope you haven't eaten a baby, North Wind," said Diamond very solemnly. North Wind laughed merrily and went tripping on faster. Her grassy robe swept and swirled about her steps, and wherever it passed over withered leaves, they went fleeing and whirling in spirals and running on their edges like wheels all about her feet. And if you're waiting for me to explain something, what's going on here, I'm going to read a bit further, and then something will become clear. "No," she said at last, "I did not eat a baby. You would not have had to ask that foolish question if you had not let go your hold of me. You would have seen how I served a nurse that was calling a child bad names and telling her she was wicked. She had been drinking. I saw an ugly gin bottle in a cupboard." "And you frightened her?" said Diamond. "I believe so," answered North Wind, laughing merrily. "I flew at her throat, and she tumbled on the floor with such a crash that they ran in. She'll be turned away tomorrow in quite time, if they knew as much as I do." "But didn't you frighten the little one?" "She never saw me. The woman would not have seen me either if she had not been wicked." "Oh," said Diamond dubiously. "Why should you see things," returned North Wind, "that you wouldn't understand or know what to do with? Good people see good things, bad people bad things." "Then are you a bad thing?" "No, for you see me, Diamond, dear," said the girl, and she looked down at him, and Diamond saw the loving eyes of the great lady beaming from the depths of her falling hair. "I had to make myself look like a bad thing before she could see me. If I had put on any other shape than a wolf's, she would not have seen me, for that is what is growing to be her own shape inside of her." "I don't know what you mean," said Diamond, "but I suppose it's all right." They were now climbing the slope of a grassy ascent. It was Primrose Hill, in fact, although Diamond had never heard of it. The moment they reached the top, North Wind stood and turned her face towards London. The stars were still shining clear and cold overhead. There was not a cloud to be seen. The air was sharp, but Diamond did not find it cold. "Now," said the lady, "whatever you do, do not let my hand go. I might have lost you the last time, only I was not in a hurry then. Now I am in a hurry." Yet she stood still for a moment. And that's the end of that chapter. The next chapter is called North Wind, and we'll find some more out about this character. Now again, a couple things here, okay? As we get through these chapters, there's quite a few chapters. It looks like a small book here, and it is relatively, but there's quite a few chapters, and we're going with this character North Wind, and then the story will completely change, and what comes before will matter, but this eventually in a couple of chapters the story will change, and it's just quite a ride of different turns, and you never know exactly what to expect. I hope you're looking forward to that if you haven't read it before. But also, just to say a word about the end of this chapter here. What we should know, or at least if we can expect anything, it's that Macdonald put at the beginning of the story that little bit about Herodotus in chapter 1 and the legend of the North Wind, this place at North Wind, where people drowned, and that's about to come up. And George Macdonald's trying to tell us already that even if it seems like a horrible thing that North Wind is doing, it's just because we don't have the same perspective as North Wind. There's more to be found out, because North Wind is always good, and oftentimes we could have seen some of it if we just keep holding on, right? I did make a comment last chapter that it was good that Diamond, stopped and said hello to his horse and was sweet, and I think that's true. I think George Macdonald was trying to show us that, Diamond cares about everybody and everything, and his horse, Old Diamond, too. But he did let go of North Wind's hand, and George Macdonald also wants to show us, hey, if we're taking this as some sort of analogy to God, hey, hold on to me, trust me, even when I take different forms, appear differently to you, even when I'm doing things that you don't always understand, you will understand in time if you hold my hand and come along for the journey. And so, and also I think in this chapter, through the little primrose and the wind there, and through this wind coming to this interfere with this abusive alcoholic there, we see that God is acting in all kinds of ways that all kinds of good ways that we don't always see or pay attention to, and so we had to pay some more attention. But I think this story is so great too, because you can read it to a little child and they will really. I've read some of this to my children already. We've read some other stories as well by George Macdonald, and they're similar in this way. I think this is my favorite. Either that or Lilith. Of course, Lilith is not really for children, but like the Curdie stories, Princess and Goblin, and Princess and Curdie, and some of the other stories like the Wise Woman and stuff like that. That I've read to my children, they will get some of the lessons along the way because there's a child's perspective, and they'll miss some of the things that are a little bit. George Macdonald writes it in such a way that, like we get the seriousness of what happened with this alcoholic woman and how God's interfering there, from an adult perspective, but from a child's perspective, they will get some of the lessons that he's trying to give us along the way, but also when you read it again as an adult, there's a whole other layer there, and that's what I love about it. And that's part of what I love about it. So I hope you have been blessed, neighbor, by this reading today and this little spiritual story. And I pray that the Lord would guide me and you in paying attention in the coming days before we get to the next chapter of how God is at work in our lives and how he may be even more good, even better than we realize. Thank you for joining me in the library, and I will see you again soon.